Welcome back, fiber friends, to yet another episode of the Wool to Gold podcast. Today, I'm going to be showing you guys my actual process in making bats. Specifically, I'm going to show you guys how I make the gradient style bats that I made. I made a few of them in the last podcast episode, and alongside the stripy bats, a lot of you guys were requesting how do you actually do that? How do you make a gradient? How do you separate the colors and keep them separated when you send it through the Drumcarder a second time? It's not anything crazy. I'm going to be so honest with you guys. It's not rocket science. A lot of this is just a time sink. You have to be okay with these bats taking a little bit more time because you have to be really careful about not mixing colors, as opposed to when you're making a bat that you're purposefully trying to get really mixed and kind of that tweedy effect, an even amount of something throughout the entire bat. You kind of want to just mix it all up and send it all through. But you can't do that with the gradient bats or the stripy bats. I didn't really have the materials for a super traditional gradient, but what I'm essentially gonna do is it's gonna go, one side is gonna be super blue, and then the other side is gonna have this kind of orange brown base. It's brown, it's like a chestnut brown, but then whenever I put it up into the light, on camera, it definitely looks very orangey. But I'm gonna be adding these actual orange and coral tones to it. Even though it is a gradient, I'm not gonna be radiating from the blue to the orange. It's more, I'm just gonna add the orange and the coral to put some dimension into the brown, right? I don't really like when things are super duper plain. I'm gonna keep this side with mostly just the blue. And then we're gonna use this base of Rommeldale, which is part of a fleece that I bought at Maryland Sheep and Wool, washed it, dried it. We're processing it up now so I can actually spin it into something. I know a lot of you wanted to see the process of me making a striped bat as well, and that's gonna be the next episode. So if you wanna see that, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss it. And let's get to making this bat. So in most of these videos, the way I start is by putting a base layer of wool on the Drumcarder. You don't have to do this necessarily. I tend to do this more when I have crazy art bats and I'm trying to trap certain elements inside the bat, especially on the first pass. It's not as necessary in this case, but I just like to, I don't know, that's how I like to start. I like to have a nice white base or whatever other color that I want to start with, and then I'll start adding the other elements. If you've never worked with a Drumcarder before, you might not know this or you might not be aware, but most Drumcarders have a limit to the amount of fiber that you can actually get on them, and a lot of the times it's less than you think it's going to be. So this is a pretty big Drumcarder, the one that I have. I mean, I think it's technically a standard size. It's not an extra large. But yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty big, or I consider it pretty big, but it doesn't really hold more than I feel 3.2 is around the max amount I can usually get on it. Sometimes I can get a little bit more depending on the types of fibers. Sometimes certain sari silks can be really weighty, or certain art bat elements can have some real heft to them that adds to that the ounce amount that I can actually fit on the Drumcarder. But all of that being said, that's kind of why, if you ever wondered, why are a lot of bats, not 4 ounces? Unless they're coming off, a really, really big Drumcarder. And it's usually just because, honestly, the fiber, at a certain point, the fiber stops sticking to this Drumcarder and coming off the liquor in, which is, I'll move this here so you can see better. This is the liquor in right here. And so when that happens, the fiber just ends up sticking to the liquor in, and it ends up being kind of a waste. And that's why too, even if I wanted to make the bat heavier, if I wanted to try to force 4 ounces onto here, it would be really difficult. Just because the Drumcarder stops working at a certain point. When you just have too much fiber on there. And then, I'm speaking from experience here, it's a pain in the butt to get off of the Drumcarder too. So I don't know, don't overfill your Drumcarder. It's really not worth it. And one other thing that I wanted to mention before we get started, I've talked about this little brush that goes on the back of a lot of Drumcarders before. I love this bad boy. I really think it's a necessity when it comes to making bats, especially if you're like me and you like to work with silk, bamboo, things that will, unfortunately, if they're not pushed down into the bat, when they come back around and touch the liquor in, sometimes the liquor in can start pulling it back off of the bat, which can be really, really annoying. And so one way to mitigate that is to have this brush so it squishes everything down. Same thing with like adding really like big art elements and things like that. Like when I say art elements, I just mean like strings and neps and, you know, old yarn from other things and, you know, all of the lumpy, chunky, funky things that we like to add to bats sometimes. But in addition, if you're like me and you like to work with like loftier wools, especially in the like raw or lock format, I highly recommend using one of these just to like try to optimize how much fiber you can actually get on the bat. Anyway, yeah, let's get started. Let's get some of this wool onto the Drumcarder. So I'm gonna actually flip this around and I'm gonna show you guys what the locks look like before they get like fed into the Drumcarder to the best of my ability. I broke my ring lamp like a few days ago, and actually later today I'm gonna go out and get a new one, so hopefully I'll have it by tomorrow or the next day. But yeah, I don't know, it broke and I don't have my ring light anymore. I'm just using like one of those like Octo Buddies that you put on the back of your phone, and I'm sticking it to my window. So I hope y'all don't mind some of the like odd angling. I just don't really have a better option right now. Okay, so this is what the locks look like when they are about to be fed into the Drumcarder. If I lift up like a section for you, as you can see, they're pretty pulled apart and spread out. It's not necessarily super even, but that's okay. That's what the Drumcarder is for, right? It's gonna finish opening up those locks for us. There's also a tool called a lock popper, and honestly, I can insert like a photo right over here. I should probably get one. I don't know. I haven't had the time, haven't had the money, but they do exist if you want to speed up this process a little bit, or you just don't feel like doing it by hand. Okay, so I took this off so that you guys can actually see what the Drumcarder looks like. Now it's time to add some color, okay? On the right side, I'm gonna have this nice blue base. On the other side, I'm gonna start adding some of this like brown/orange. Yeah, when we first put these layers in, it's not going to be, again, as like mixed up and blended the way it should be. It's okay if you don't end up blending the colors in the middle as thoroughly or as much as you wanted to, because we're gonna put it through the Drumcarder a second time, or at least I'm going to, and you're gonna see why I recommend this, right? I'm gonna show you guys what the bat looks like when it comes off of here, and then like before we put it through, and then what it looks like afterwards. And I think you'll agree that like the second pass looks much better, but maybe you'll disagree and you can chat about it in the comments. Here's the thing, just like with the fleece, I think it's really important to apply these in thinner layers for a multitude of reasons. First, that's just kind of what you're supposed to do to limit the like wear and tear on your Drumcarder. Like if I was to just like pull off like a big chunk like that and like put it into the Drumcarder, it wouldn't go well, okay? It would get stuck and all of that stuff. So it's just good to work in smaller sheets in general. I also think this prevents like too much from going wrong, right? Like if you put a sheet in and you're like, oh, that's not right. Like it's only one little layer and you can kind of like fix it. But if you put like a big chunk through, it's a lot harder to fix. Now, some people like to apply the fiber like directly to the drum while it's moving, right? You can get a lot of control and just apply it to like one side of the drum if you want to. My whole issue with this is that in my experience, I have a really hard time, again, controlling the like amount of fiber that's coming off, and I want to work in like thinner sheets to make a more like well blended final bat. So if you don't really care about like how blended it is, you kind of want those like chunks almost added to it, or like those zebra stripes, that's the way they kind of look once they're spun up. You can absolutely do that, and I might actually apply like one of these smaller bits of color that way, just to like show you an actual in action example. But the way that I'm going to apply the color today is I'm gonna pull off a piece like this. Again, not that big. Honestly, I'm probably gonna try to draft this out so that it's a little bit even less. And then we're gonna spread it out so that it kind of makes like, you know, the size of the section that we kind of want to apply to the bat, right? I want this on the one side and then the blue on the other. So I'm gonna put that near the liquor in, and again, I'm gonna flip this around and show it to you guys before I actually, you know, feed it in. And we're gonna do the same thing with this blue fiber as well. Pulling off a chunk, okay? Drafting this out a little bit. There we go. Kind of spreading it, opening it up so it's a nice sheet. Again, it's okay if it's not super even, because part of what the Drumcarder does is open up the fiber. I just don't like to rely on the Drumcarder to do all of the work because I just don't like the results that I get when I do that. Spinning this around so you guys can see what it actually looks like on the liquor in. It's okay if it falls over a little bit like that. And then as I'm actually like feeding it into the Drumcarder, as I'm gonna be turning this crank, I am going to be making sure that the fiber isn't really going anywhere and it's staying where it needs to. Generally, the liquor in does a really good job of like, if the fiber gets applied here, it's gonna come off over here, and it does a really nice job of kind of like evenly dispersing it across the bat as well. Whereas that's another critique that I have of like applying it by hand. I feel like in my mind, I'm applying it very evenly, but then when I'm actually spinning the bat, I realize I did not apply it evenly at all. So it just comes down to like how much control you want over your bat, and I'm a bit of a control freak, so I like to have a lot of control over the way the bat comes out. Alrighty, and as you can see, we have the start of a gradient bat, okay? The next sections I'm gonna pull off, I am gonna make them a little bit wider so that I have a little bit more of an overlap between this blue and this like brown orange color, and we can kind of make it more of like a true gradient. I'll talk about this in maybe another episode when I actually spin this bat and the different ways that you can spin gradient bats. But like the quick gist of it is, if you were to take this, like strip it into a bunch of strips and then spin it from like top to bottom, kind of similar to the way you would do like a hand-dyed gradient braid, and then you were to chain ply it, you would end up with a gradient yarn. That's really one of my favorite things about like working in fiber arts, working with fiber in this form, and having a Drumcarder. That's one of the reasons I really wanted a Drumcarder, because it really does give you the ability to take like, again, fiber that was kind of just sitting around that I was never going to use by itself and turn it into different things that you'll actually end up using. This chunk looks a little bit wider, maybe a little bit too wide, so I'm going to take off a little section, and sometimes I like to send the colors through like one at a time. I actually find that a lot easier, just because I just feel like I have more control and I don't have to watch like two elements at once. I can just do like, I don't know, again, one at a time. Something kind of controversial that I do, that I know a lot of other people with Drumcarders are going to be like, that's not what you're supposed to do. That's not like, that's how you get fiber stuck to your liquor in, blah, blah, blah. Listen, you can say that all you want. I have not found this to be my experience. People are like, there are a lot of people who have said to me, if you touch the fiber at all, or like hold back the fiber at all when it's feeding into the drum, that it's going to get stuck on the liquor in. Like, that's how things get stuck on the liquor in. I disagree. I understand that is like, if you really hold it and stop it from going into the Drumcarder, then it is gonna get stuck on the liquor in. But if you are just kind of like, if you're realizing you didn't draft the fiber out enough and you need to kind of like pull it out a little bit, especially if you are using a hand crank drum, you can just stop it, right? And like draft it out a little bit more, and I don't know. I will gently guide and hold the fiber to keep it in the place it's supposed to be, so that it doesn't migrate over to the other side of the Drumcarder. Or I'll even like use my hand as kind of like a barrier to do this. Again, I've had so many people on specifically lives when I'm like making bats be like, you're not supposed to do that, and get like really angry with me. But I've talked about this in my episode where I talked about drum carding in general, and when I talk about this carder, I find that this classic carder, so little fiber gets stuck on the liquor in, especially wool. Wool is not the fiber that gets stuck on this liquor in. It's almost always bamboo or silk that gets stuck. And I found one of the things that, like, when I was testing a bunch of Drumcarders that I liked about this one the most is that the liquor in does not just eat up a bunch of fiber and get a bunch of stuff stuck to it. And I find that, you know, maybe it's just that this Drumcarder is more resilient to that kind of thing, but I've never had an issue like, gently holding the fiber. I'm not like holding it back, like I'm not pinching on it. I feel like sometimes you guys forget that like I'm a spinner too. I spin these bats, and so I have a very like gentle touch, like baby bird hand, you know, because if you grip your fiber too tightly when you're spinning, then you will run into a lot of issues with drafting. It'll be really frustrating for you. Same thing with this. Like I just lightly hold it on the side that it's supposed to be on, and it'll stay there. It'll make things a lot easier. Okay, so now before I start adding some of the like elements to the like orangey brown side that are gonna give it a little bit more depth like this, I am gonna add another layer of a white fleece on top of this. So I'm gonna show you guys what it looks like. So here it is, and I can already hear people saying, oh my gosh, there is so much more of the blue than there is the brown. No. I just put a layer of blue that like, you know, I want this middle section to have a little bit of both, right? So the last layer that I put on this was the blue, so it's on top, so it's hiding the brown that's underneath. And this is the reason, again, that I come back a time and time again. I'm like, you need to be blending, you need to be sending your bats through the Drumcarder twice if you want them super thoroughly blended, because when you send this through the second time, it is going to blend it all together throughout all of the layers. So you're not gonna have that like super just like parfait layer effect that some bats have. That like, don't get me wrong, sometimes I love spinning one of those bats. Like I love being able to take apart the different layers of a bat and things like that, but also sometimes I want a really thoroughly blended bat. And in this case, especially with a gradient, that's definitely gonna be the case. So we have our layer of white down, the white Rommeldale, and now I am just adding more of this base brown before adding the oranges and the corals. And now I've added another layer of our base colors to both sides. Now it's time to add some of these like depth elements to this side, just because like I like the orange chestnut brown. I just don't think it's all that exciting. And I think this yarn would be more fun if it did have, I don't know, a little bit something more going on. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about applying fiber right directly to the drum. This is an option. When I do it, as you can see, I like to go really slow, and I still like to go in super duper thin layers. I just think, see, and that's the thing. This is what happens when I feel like fiber gets applied directly to the drum. Obviously, you can catch it and fix it and not let it go through. But I just don't like it when like bigger chunks accidentally come out. I find that I just like to have pre-drafting it and sending it through the liquor in just gives me more control, weirdly enough, than like directly applying it to the bat. Right, now I'm gonna add a little bit of this orange, just a few sheets, nothing crazy. Then we do have to add more of this blue on this side because we want the amount of fiber that's on both sides to be like fairly even. All right, and you know what time it is. It's time to add more fleece. And essentially, you're just gonna repeat that process over and over again until you feel like your drum carder is full enough, or you have enough fiber on there, or the bat is the size that you relatively want it. Once you get to that point where you just feel like you either can't put any more fiber on the drum carder, or it's the size that you want, or you've used all the fiber that you have, it'll be time to take the actual bat off of the drum carder. So we're gonna do that, and I'm gonna show you guys what it looks like before I pull it apart and we send it back through to get it a little bit more thoroughly blended. All right, full disclosure, as you can probably tell from the lighting, I did have to take a little bit of a break to go grocery shopping, just like before everything closed, and I lost the energy, but I am back. Okay, it's the same day, good for me. And we are going to take apart this bat and send it back through the Drumcarder, just to give it more of a properly blended, a little bit more of a gradient effect. So usually, okay, when you look at the side of this, I call it the cake effect. There's probably an actual fiber term for it, but I personally like my fibers to be a little bit more blended than this. You can kind of see the distinct layers that we added still, especially once I break it open and pull it apart like this, which we have to do anyway. You can really see it on this side, how distinct those layers are. So how are we gonna do this? Essentially, I'm gonna take this strip, and remember what I did with all of that other fiber before I fed it into the drum carder? No one's surprised. We're literally gonna do the same thing. So I start to draft out pieces. Once again, you can just pull off a chunk, and you can draft it both vertically and horizontally. Get it the size that you want. And again, by sending it through the drum carder a second time, if you're working with fleece, you can kind of see, or maybe you can't, but I can see, that there's still some tips that haven't fully opened yet on this fiber. And besides trying to blend this a little bit more and make this more of a cohesive bat, as opposed to separated elements, I also really want to open up those locks a little bit more. So whenever I do the second drum carding like I'm doing now, I really try to work with the colors separately. So I'm not going to be putting the orange and blue through the drum carder at the same time, which again, this adds time to the process. This takes a while because you have to do it piece by piece, and you have to make sure you're blending enough in the middle, but not, overlapping them too much so that the colors get muddy. It's a whole balance. And so this is why it takes so long to do these and the stripy bats, because you just have to do the colors separately in order for it to come out as perfect as you want it to, or as perfect as I want it to. A lot of the times, one of the ways that I make sure that my sheets are actually thin enough, and a good way to gauge whether or not you're drafting out your pieces enough and you're not putting through too much fiber at once, is there shouldn't really be much resistance while you're turning your drum carder. So if you watch here, there's not really going to be, I don't really need to use a ton of effort in order to get the fiber to feed in. If you start feeling like you really have to push, you're probably putting too much fiber in, or too thick of a piece in. Okay, so now we got to take off a piece of the blue. This is a real big chunk here. But that's okay, because we're just gonna, I don't know, pull a piece off. The blue, it doesn't really matter as much because it's mostly just blue and white, but that's all right. Okay, so this is the chunk that I have left. Okay, I put the rest of the fiber onto the Drumcarder already. Apologies, that's getting a little blown out, but again, the lighting's a little weird now because it's a different time of the day. But essentially what we need to do is strip this down into 3 separate sections. So like mostly orange, mostly blue, and then the part in between that really is kind of a mix of both of them. So anytime you strip a fiber, it's literally like exactly what the word sounds like. You're just turning it into strips. It's not super sophisticated or super duper complicated. I didn't realize, oh, I don't want to pull too much blue out of there. But yeah, okay. So we have this sky. You can kind of tell it's a mix because you can see both the colors from both the sides. This piece, what we're gonna try to do is really only feed this in through the very center part. And that's why for the next portion of this, I'm actually gonna turn the Drumcarder around and show you this entire leg process from a different angle, just because I think it illustrates what I'm doing better. And you can kind of see how I like guide the fiber and keep the fiber in the right place. So I think this is probably like the best angle I'm gonna get on this. And I'm gonna try to illustrate exactly how I load the rest of this fiber onto the Drumcarder. So first we're gonna do the easy parts, the super easy parts. So there's not that much blue left. So I'm just gonna kind of draft this out and I'm gonna try to focus the fiber to this side of the bat because I know I'm going to be putting a lot of fiber in the middle portion and just the middle portion. So these last pieces of fiber are really gonna be like concentrated on the edges for that reason. So essentially, if you draft it out and make the strip, small enough, I think it'll stay on this side by itself for the most part. And then we're gonna do the same thing on the other side, on this side with the orange, with the remainder of the predominantly orange fiber. All right, and I don't really know if you're able to tell. I actually think you can see, especially from this angle. So you can see that like this side is super filled and then like this side is super filled, but then there's like a dip here. And that's kind of, again, purposeful because that dip in the middle is where we're gonna put like the blended colors. Also, can we just take a moment to appreciate the colors of this bat? I'm really pleased with the colors of this bat. I think it looks so nice. And I feel like with the sun the way it is, as annoying as the sun is in my eyes, it really does capture the colors nicely. And essentially, I think the best way to get like all of the colors actually blended up is to really like draft it out into very thin portions and then just feed those portions like that into the very center of the Drumcarder. All right, so now we have our finished bat. This is what it looks like, still on the Drumcarder. I'll take it off and show it to you guys. I'm pretty proud of this one. I think she's a cutie. I don't know exactly what I'm gonna name it yet, so put some suggestions down below if you can think of anything, because I play with this color scheme so much that sometimes I feel like I pull from the same themes over and over again, so it's always nice to get like input on names. Yeah, I'm really pleased with this bat. Let's take it off the Drumcarder and see how it actually looks. Okay, here is the bat in all of its glory. I think it looks even nicer off of the actual Drumcarder. There's a number of ways that you can like fold up bats. So sometimes I just like to fold them down the middle, and I do like to roll them up and store them like a donut like this. But sometimes it's kind of hard to see what the bat actually looks like. And as a result, especially with these gradient bats, I kind of do a more traditional roll where I just kind of roll the whole thing down the center like that. And then sometimes if it's big enough like this one, I'll give it a little fold. And then, yeah, there we go. From this side, you can really see like, oh, okay, this is a gradient bat. So yeah, the reason that I'm making all these gradient bats is because I am planning on doing like a little tutorial on how to actually like spin something like this, because although some people find it really straightforward, I get DMs every day asking specifically how to spin bats. Bats have been very popular lately. So yeah, this bad boy, I don't know what we're gonna name her, but she's such a beaut. Look at her. She's great. So yeah, that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching this little tutorial. Come make a bat with me, whatever you want to call it. The lighting right now is absolutely blinding, so I'm gonna let y'all go. But yeah, thanks for watching. Again, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Wool to Gold podcast.